Hello, today's video is about how to build skillful and respectful communication by honouring the gap between intent and impact. Okay, I'm going to explain what I mean by using a story about flying, and I'm also going to use my avocado salt and pepper shaker that I was given for Christmas to model what this looks like for you in your environment. Now think about the relationships that you really want to invest in. These could be relationships with loved ones at home. These could be colleagues, people you're trying to develop, but also your prospects and your customers, okay? Because ultimately, as we all know, good business comes down to good relationships. So think about how you can apply this to the relationships that you most value. Let me tell you a story about what I mean about intent versus impact. So when I was flying helicopters, my job is to get soldiers from A to B. That's pretty much why we're there. We're a battle taxi. And so we would brief the mission and say, we're going to check in on this frequency when we are 2 minutes out. And then you can come back to us and say, yeah, we're still at the location that, we were briefed. And then we might give a 30-second call to say, inbound, and then everybody knows to get ready to get on the helicopter. Now, obviously, the intent behind that is to make sure that we get the job done. What would invariably happen is in the last 15 seconds, when we are on short finals, the net would suddenly come alive with this chatter. And they would start saying, oh, and there's a tree, and you've got to look at this, and and they'd start talking on the net. Now, the final stages of approach is a really busy time, and you're kind of, you're working pretty hard in the crew. So actually the impact that it had was that it really just kind of drained capacity from us. And if I'm honest, probably sometimes kind of annoyed us a little bit. So that's what I mean about the difference between intent and impact. The intent is to make our life easier. The impact was actually to make our life a little bit harder. So that's what I mean about the difference between intent and impact. Now, what does that mean for you in real life? Okay, so let's have person A, who's the intent, who is transmitting a message. In our environment, it was genuinely transmitting a message, but this could be any form of communication, whether that is verbal, non-verbal, through action, or through inaction. But this person is communicating. This is person A, and this is the person who is receiving the message, okay? Now, what person A needs to understand is that when that message leaves, there is this gap, okay, in between. And there is nothing you can do about that. Person A has absolutely no control over how person B interprets that message. How that lands and how that impacts is not up to this person, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't explain what your intent was. But what we often do, so say the message doesn't land the way we want it to and it negatively impacts someone. The temptation is that person A will say, but that's not what I meant. I meant this. So you should be thinking this. And what we try to do is we try to sort of correct what this person is thinking or feeling. And that doesn't tend to go down very well. Now, you can see why person A does this, okay? Person A is thinking, but hang on a minute, I'm a good person. I didn't mean to cause negative impact. And, you might feel quite defensive, so it's not difficult to see why you would, but we have to understand that it is not our responsibility to decide how this person receives the message that you transmit, okay? So what you can do is say, person A, that's not what I intended. My intention was this, but I can see that it impacted you in this way. And what you can now do is you can now acknowledge the impact that it had on this person. This person now feels heard. Okay, that's going to go a lot further than trying to tell this person to think differently. This person now feels heard. And what person A could also do is go, could you tell me what I could do differently so that it would land better? Now you are seeking to understand how you could modify your communication so that it has the desired impact on this person. Now this person feels acknowledged, but also they feel like they truly are understood and valued. So that's what person A can do when they are turning intention into impact. We acknowledge that there is a gap between the two and there is nothing we can do about that. That's called free will. That's not going anywhere, and we don't want it to, because that means we all get to decide what we think and feel. We can acknowledge it, however, and we can seek to understand better. And if it is deemed worthy, we can start to modify what we do on this side. Okay, so that's person A. Let's talk about person B. Okay, so person B has been impacted. Now, whether we realize it or not, we choose how we are impacted. We choose to be offended or hurt, or we choose to feel complimented. These are all choices we make. Now, they're probably choices that have, been, a lot of it is formed by, beliefs, learnt behaviours. So we don't necessarily realise we have a choice, but we do choose. Now, there's nothing wrong with how we are impacted, with how we interpret things. If we do feel offended or hurt, or, we've been annoyed, or it's not landed the way we want it to, we're perfectly entitled to feel like that. So there's no need to kind of beat ourselves up or feel like we, have to feel kind of ashamed. But what we can do is we can acknowledge, again, there is a gap between intent and impact. So what that means is that even though we have been impacted in a certain way, it is quite possible, in fact, quite likely, that person A meant no harm. And we can often kind of save ourselves a lot of unnecessary angst when we realise, actually, okay, it did impact me in a certain way, not very happy about it, but I can see that's probably not what they meant. So we don't need to extrapolate how it impacted to how we imagine they intended. And that's what we often do. We go, well, this is the way it impacted me, so they must have meant this. We don't know that. So again, what person B can do is acknowledge the impact that it's had, but then seek to understand. Tell me, what did you mean by that? What was your intent? What were you hoping to, what outcome were you hoping for? And you can seek to understand more about what that person's intent was. And that means that the next time that person communicates in that way, you might go, oh, okay, well, I know from experience that actually they meant this, so you're less likely to be offended. Or you might even say, hey, you know what, would you be willing to have a conversation about how we could work better together? This is the sort of thing that really impacts well with me. So to go back to our helicopter example, okay, the army soldier is on the net with 30 seconds to go and he's totally maxing us out. Now, what I could do as person B who has been impacted is I can go to person A and say, what were you intending by doing that? And person A will probably say, well, I was trying to help you to, make a safe landing. And if I'm honest, I got a bit excited because I heard the sound of the blades slicing through the air and I got to get very excited about being on a helicopter. Okay, well, I kind of understand that. I think helicopters are quite cool too. Actually, it's quite cool being a pilot. So do you know what? I find it hard to be offended by that. However, now that I understand your intent, would you like to know how we could work better together? Sure, I'd love to know how we could work better together. Well, I tell you what, when we're on finals, we're actually pretty busy. But when we're downwind, which is when we're pointing away from you, we've got a little bit of capacity, and that's a great time to communicate with us, and so on and so forth. So that is how we nourish our relationships, and we start to close the gap between intent and impact, but we'll never fully close it, and that's okay, because that's where free will exists. Okay, so I hope that helps. There is a gap between what you intend and how it lands, but you can seek to understand what it is like for the other party and decide what you want to do about it and collaborate so that you can develop skillful and respectful communication. I hope that's helpful, and let me know what you think.